Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Please hold as we wait for our final panelist to join in. Okay. Hi, everyone. Apologies for the delay. We're ready to get started momentarily. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or afternoon. If you are on the West Coast, thanks for joining our webinar. I will keep my camera off for now and come online during QA so that we can focus on the slides. Just some housekeeping. So I get the windows here under control, my screen. Everybody will be muted. Please enter your questions using the Q&A feature. We'll compile and answer questions at the end, and please feel free to send out any unanswered questions, and we will make the recording available. We realized that there are more people that wanted to join today, and we're not able to do so because of schedules. So the next slide. Welcome to this informational session. And if you don't mind, Karen, doing the next slide. I am glad to introduce the medical research program team and an outline of what we will cover. My name is Cindy Escobar Alvarez, and I direct the medical research program. Next is our program officer, Kevin Sia, who you saw earlier on the screen, and then our program associate, Karen Han, who is running this who is running the webinar and helped us organize it. I will share about the foundation, the medical research program, and the overall goal of the Clinical Scientist Development Award. Kevin will then go into the competition details, its eligibility and selection process for this award. And finally, Karen will go over how to apply. So briefly about the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. We are, and if you, Karen, if you do next slide, we are a group of national grant-making programs in environmental conservation, performing arts, child well-being, and medical research, and centers and museums that support the well-being of people and the planet for a more creative and equitable future and sustainable future. And also, as for the medical research program, our mission is to advance the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of human disease by strengthening and supporting clinical research. And a way in which we strengthen clinical research is through support of a key piece of its workforce on the next slide. And that is, we encourage and develop clinical research careers, as well as the path and retention of physician scientists. In terms of clinical research, if you mind doing the next slide, we support research along the full spectrum from etiology of disease to implementation. And these are some images from the grantees and work that we support and their projects. And we encourage study of research questions that are designed to benefit and be generalizable to individuals most affected by diseases with high morbidity and mortality, whether they're common or rare. And in particular, research questions that would benefit groups that have been marginalized. And I will pause there and I'll tell you more about this, the Clinical Scientist Development Award, a couple of slides, and then turn it to Kevin. So the next slide, here are some of our 2020 recipients of the Clinical Scientist Development Award, and the goal is to facilitate the transition from early career assistant professor, physician, scientist to independent research careers through support for the research as well as protection of research time. The award itself provides $150,000 per year for 3 years, plus 10% indirect cost. And in terms of how many applications are supported annually, it's about 10% of all that are reviewed. So in the next slide, we are committed to the retention and advancement of early career physician scientists who are conducting seminal clinical research and who belong to populations whose exclusion from research based on race, ethnicity, gender, disability, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status has resulted in underrepresentation in the workforce. So please apply. This is part of our values, and I will turn it over to Kevin. And Kevin, are you muted?
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Thanks. So I'll speak on the eligibility criteria for the CSDA. The award is focused on early career physician scientists at the assistant professor rank. Applicants should have received, must have received an MD, a DO or foreign equivalent, and have a valid active US medical license. So we want to emphasize the applicants do not have to have US citizenship in order to apply, but they should have completed their clinical and research training and have completed and finished any graduate degrees by the award start date, which is the 1st of July 2022. So as I mentioned, the award is focused on early career physician scientist faculty. So applicants must have a full-time faculty appointment at the assistant professor rank, and that their first full-time appointment should have been no longer than 4 years ago, which is December 1, 2017, and the applicants should have had their appointments for at least 1 year. So the award is meant to help facilitate transition to independent research funding for physician scientists. One of the ways that the award does this is through research time protection. So recipients of the award need to be guaranteed minimum overall research time protection of 75% of full-time professional effort during the term of the award. So this does not mean that applicants need to already have that level of research time protection. And this also does not mean that we require applicants dedicate their research time allocation entirely to the CSDA. So ultimately what we want is for awardees, for grantees, to be able to have protected time for research. So next slide, please. Applicants should also not have served as PI or one of multiple PIs on any research grant, multi-year research grant, cooperative agreement, or contract with an annual direct funding of $225,000 or higher that has a start date prior to and inclusive of the award start, the CSDA award start date, which is July 1st, 2022. And they should also not have applied for an NIH R01 research grant or equivalent with a start date prior to and inclusive of the CSDA award start date. So we think it's great when faculty are ready to apply for that level of funding. However, this particular award is really meant for faculty at an earlier stage to get them ready to apply competitively for that level of funding. Applicants that hold career development awards, such as NIH, the K-Series Awards, or other career development awards, including those from other foundations, are eligible to apply. And the eligibility exemption requests are due in October 15th, 2021 by 5 p.m. And we'll get to respond to all of them by October or on October 20th, end of day. So next slide, please. So applicants must be working in an institution that grants doctoral degrees and that these institutions are based in the United States. However, there is no geographic restriction for the research projects that are proposed, that applicants can propose. So we're happy to invite global health research projects, for example. So it's also very important that the institution has a status as a 501c3 organization, or that the applicant is affiliated with such an institution or organization that can receive the award. So please reach out to your grants and contracts office for the appropriate tax ID to use for the application. And my colleague Karen will talk more about this tax ID, the importance of using the tax ID later on. So public universities do have grant receiving arms with the 501c3 status. So reach out to, again, your grants and contracts office to get this specific tax ID. And providing the correct tax ID for your institution's 501c3 grant receiving arm will facilitate the award process should you be awarded. And yeah, so that's really the important parts about the tax ID. So we can't provide any further guidance regarding that. And sorry. So yeah, correct. For this program, the clinical research is defined as the scientific investigation of the etiology, prevention, diagnosis, or treatment of human disease using human subjects, human populations, or materials of human origin. So human populations includes, or research on human population includes health outcomes research, health services research, and epidemiology research. So included in this definition are studies that utilize tissues or pathogens that can be linked to a patient. Experiments that utilize non-human animals or tissues derived from them, including established animal cell lines, must not be included in the proposed research. We also want to emphasize that each individual applicant is best positioned to judge the best mentor or mentorship team. So yeah, we also want to emphasize that proposals with research aims that directly overlap with another funded project is not allowed, and this is really due to the fact that we don't want to fund something that has already been funded, and also we don't want to run into a scenario with budgetary overlaps with. If you were awarded 2 research awards with the same aims, while we are quite flexible and understanding, we don't want to run into a situation where we have to modify the aims post-award. So in addition to the NIH K-Series Award and other foundation career development awards, recipients of the NIH Director's Early Independence Award and individuals in the ROO phase of their Pathway to Independence Awards, or the K99 Award, are eligible, provided that they meet other eligibility criteria. So next slide, please. So applicants don't need to have an IRB approval at the time of application, but we do want, we recommend that the necessary IRB approvals are in place by the award start date, and we do require that the necessary ones are in place by the fall following the award notification, and we don't allow any research that's proposed in the funded proposals that do not have the necessary IRB approvals in place. On the other hand, the investigational new drug approvals, those do have to be in place by the deadline for submission of a full proposal, which is the spring of 2022. Next slide, please. So this is just the overview process on a bird's eye view. We are currently in the pre-proposal phase. So the pre-proposals are due by 3 p.m. on November 12th. And then those will go on to a review panel, which consists of our scientific advisory council members, which are distinguished scientists that know the physician scientist career path, and they'll be complemented by other individuals that have a deep knowledge of the physician scientist career path and the challenges therein, and with their own domain expertise. So the review state criteria for stage 1 is can be found in attachment 1 on page 20 of the RFA. And then at the beginning of next year, we will invite approximately 50 applications to submit a full proposal that'll be due in March 11th. So the red arrows there are just to show you that after the pre-proposal submission and after the full proposal submission, there is an administrative review that takes place, and applicants whose applications don't adhere to the guidelines that we've laid out in the RFA, those applications will not reach the reviewers. So it's very, very important that you check your application against the checklist in attachment 2 on page 22 of the RFA, so that your application, makes it through to the review process. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the review criteria is also included in the RFA. It's in attachment 1, page 20 of the RFA. These are the 5 criteria that are considered in review: the investigator, the mentoring and institutional environment, the significance of the proposal, and originality of the proposal, and the study design. And so I just do want to note that because the pre-proposal portion is just a short 2 pages, the study design does not have to be, we're not inviting the most extensive study design, but it has to be sound within the scope of the project proposed. And so these criteria that are outlined, these are really the same criteria that are provided to the review panel. So it's very important that you go over them, because these are what's provided, and these the criteria are exactly what will are exactly the criteria that the pre-proposals will be judged with.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So I will now go over the actual administrative steps of how to apply. So essentially, to begin and complete your pre-proposal application, you will need to visit 2 websites. I will go over the first one, which is your online application form. And this is where the applicant themselves will submit the full pre-proposal through our new grants portal called Giving Data. As you'll know, we launched without this link available, but it will now be available on the competition webpage of our website, which is shown here. It's just the CSDA landing page, and a link to that online form will be available at the top of the page by the end of business day today. So delving more deeply into that very briefly, this is where the applicant will complete the online application form as outlined in the RFA. And the RFA will tell you all the questions in advance of what is on that form. And it is also where the applicant will upload their pre-proposal attachment. And this is where the tax ID that Kevin previously mentioned comes into play, your 9-digit EIN. We highly recommend, as we said, that you reach out to your grants office directly in terms of verifying that you have the correct EIN. Because once you get to the portal to launch the online pre-proposal, once you've created your account, in order to actually start the application, you will first need to enter that tax ID. And there is this option when you type in the tax ID, it'll also say that you can search for your institution. We do not recommend doing that. We recommend that you actually have your tax ID on hand, because you don't want to run into an instance of, particularly for schools that might have multiple institutions or affiliated hospitals, that you choose the incorrect one, or you choose one that is actually not the 501c3 grant receiving arm. Because as we mentioned, if that happens and your application gets chosen, it does actually delay the process of processing the award and getting everything paid out when the organization is not the correct one. So do make sure you verify that you are using the correct tax ID. And also, as a quick note for any returning applicants, this online application form is a new portal altogether this year. As I said, it's giving data. So as you can see in the screenshot below, it will look very different for people who might have participated in last year's competition. So just keep that in mind. And as I said, this will be available on our website by the end of the day on the competition landing page. So once you have logged on, launched your application form and entered your EIN, you will have to complete an eligibility verification quiz that will go through the eligibility criteria that Kevin had previously mentioned. If you don't meet the conditions and you fail the quiz, but you do think that you would merit an eligibility exemption, as we mentioned before, do fill out an eligibility exemption request by close of business of October 15th. You can find that linked in the RFA on page 6. And then once you have accessed the pre-proposal application, getting through that eligibility quiz, it will look like what you see below, where you'll see a home page. And from there, you'll be able to download any necessary templates, such as, the RFA to reference as you're working, and any other forms, such as the BioSketch form template that we ask that you use. And then you'll note that on the side, you see this gray bar, and it will show you all the parts of the online application form that will show a green check mark as you complete each form. So it will be able to tell you, when you've completed the form and it's ready to be submitted. And as we noted, since this is a new system, we ask for any patience if you run into any bugs, and we welcome any feedback at mrp@ddcf.org. You can get all our contact information again from that home page of the online form. And this form auto-saves as you work. So then moving on to actually what is in this online application form, as we mentioned, refer to page 9 of the RFA. It will show you a summary of all the application components. So everything is there step by step. Just make sure you're following along to complete. And then moving on to the second website that applicants need to visit, they will need to visit SurveyMonkey Apply to invite their mentor and their department chair to submit a commitment form. So the key thing to note here is that the only thing the applicant does on this website is go to this website and you enter your mentor and chair's email addresses, and it's the mentor and chair that actually have to fill out this form. The applicant doesn't get to see the form and doesn't have any power over how to submit it. So we highly recommend that you visit this second website as soon as possible to give your mentor and your chair ample time to submit their forms, because these will submit independently of the actual applicant's online application form. However, they both have the same deadline of November 12th, and if one is submitted but the other is not, your application does not count as complete and will be disqualified. So we highly urge you to visit the recommender site as soon as possible and give people ample time and reminders to complete this form. And an important thing to note here is that if your mentor or chair has multiple email addresses, only the email address you are entering will have access to this website, because there will be a unique link sent. So do make sure you're using the correct email address for your mentor and chair respectively. And just as a quick note, as soon as your mentor and chair completes their forms on this second website, those will submit on their own. So really the only thing the applicant does here is send out the invitation. Everything else takes care of itself once the mentor and chair do their part. So just for reference, this is what the SurveyMonkey Apply website will look like for recommendations. And just as a quick note, DDCF does host multiple competitions on this website. So just make sure that you're clicking the CSDA Clinical Scientist Development Award campaign. And then once you click into that campaign, this is the applicant's view, which again, I reiterate, will be different from the recommender and chair. They will have to access this website through the invitation link that you send them. So that pretty much covers what you need to do to apply. As I said, you need to visit both of these websites to have a complete pre-proposal application. So then I'll also quickly go over some common errors to avoid now that you know the application steps. As we've frequently mentioned throughout the course of this webinar, your key here is to refer to that second attachment on page 22 of the RFA for a compliance checklist, because we will go through the same compliance checklist when we are doing administrative review. There are no surprises there. And then some other common errors we see would be making note that the designated mentor and the chair are the ones that have to submit the recommendation forms through SurveyMonkey Apply. And also, as a quick note, if your mentor happens to be your department chair, that one individual has to complete both of the forms because they actually ask for different things. So they'll end up being notified twice and will need to do the 2 different forms. And then also some quick tips will be, don't recycle your grant applications from different competitions, because there are very specific formatting and section requirements that are unique to the CSDA. And then if you are a returning applicant, make sure that you are referring to the 2022 RFA, because we also do change our instructions from year to year. And then also check your pre-proposal application attachment to make sure that all the sections are in the correct order. You can see the order of pages on page 15 of the RFA. And then as part of that application attachment, there is a research plan description. Make sure that you refer to page 17 of the RFA, where it notes 6 subsections that we like addressed in the research plan description. Our recommendation here is to directly paste in those subtitles just to make sure you have clearly addressed each of those sections. And then also be sure to submit your biosketch as the PI using the DDCF biosketch template, which again can be downloaded off the online application form or accessed on the RFA. You'll note that we do also ask that you submit your mentor's biosketches, but those should just use NIH format. The only DDCF biosketch template that should be used is one time for the applicant themselves. So then just to reiterate some key dates, the pre-proposal stage 1 of this competition, those applications will be due November 12th at 3 p.m. And then invitations to submit a full proposal will be sent out by close of business on January 14th, 2022. Full proposals will then be due March 11th at 3 p.m. And then notifications of award will take place by the end of May. And then that award start date for this 2022 competition will be July 1st, 2022. So thanks for listening, everyone. That was a brief overview of everything you need to know for the competition. So at this point, we'd like to open it up to Q&A. So as I said, please submit through the Q&A box. And then also just a quick note that if your question is very specific to your circumstances of eligibility, we would advise that you actually submit an exemption request right away or email ddcf@aibs.org, because that often requires our staff to review your biosketch and kind of really dig into the details of your own circumstance. So we'd like to open this up and keep this more general for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen and Kevin. And I see there are a lot of questions coming in, so please keep on typing them. We will address them, and certainly one by one as we can through this webinar. And if we don't get to it, we'll send you the responses. So in terms of, I'd just like to comment on three themes that I've seen coming through in the questions. One is this eligibility window and what appointment, what rank is used as the reference point for that appointment. And we recognize that some of you might have been following our competition over the years and know that at times we've like as early as last year, it was anchored to an instructor appointment. And what we have really learned over the years is that there's a lot of variability in how the instructor appointment is used across academic institutions. And so some of them are the first faculty appointment, many are not. And so to try to, in an effort of being fair to all the applicants, we've done this year, and which we have done in years past, is to anchor it to the first assistant professor appointment. So it's just ask us, if you're considering your eligibility, ask yourself what is the date of your first assistant professor appointment, which may not necessarily be your current appointment. You may have had an assistant professor appointment before. So if that date falls in between that range that we provide in the request for applications, then you're eligible. And if there's any reason that for which you may not be eligible and you would like us to consider an exemption, please do send us, submit a form, and we'll get back to you as described earlier. In terms of overlap of aims, and Kevin mentioned this, that we discourage submitting the same aims as for another application, even if that application is pending and you don't know if it will get supported. And part of the reason is that the Clinical Scientist Development Award, we allow for concurrent grants that are career development. So if you have a K award, you can have, it is okay to have a CSDA and a K. We see that as a plus. Or for other career development awards that are from foundations, for example. However, we know that other foundations do not allow concurrent career development awards. So if you have submitted the same aims, either you might have to decline one of the awards, right? And so do also remember that there is a process. You could always withdraw your application from us, but those go out to review. So there are individuals that are evaluating it. So that's just a clarification point there. Also, I think it should be very clear how the CSDA proposal itself would help advance both your research and your career. And if it is just an extension of another grant, or if it overlaps with another proposal that you've put out, it creates a conflict in terms of of the two grants supporting the same aims. Now, in terms of, I also wanted to comment on another very important point here, which is the review criteria. And that we do make it, for transparency, we make it available to you so you can make sure that your pre-proposal describes ways and makes it easier for the reviewers to see how your pre-proposal meets those criteria. Our criteria are not the same as the National Institutes of Health, so we do invite you, to read them and see for yourself. There are also, this is we are not we are a funder that has their own sort of a set of what we're trying to support in terms of that is disclosed in the review criteria. But also we don't have some of the limitations that other types of funding might have. For example, work with stem cells, the origin of the stem cells or that kind of thing, which at times might be restricted, for example, by other sources of funding. So if you have any questions about that, do get in touch with us. And I'll ask Kevin if there are other questions, that you see on the list that you want to address.
Our universities are only universities eligible to receive the grants. So in this case, I wanted to say that 501c3 organizations and institutions are able to receive the grants, and that includes places like affiliated hospitals or hospitals affiliated with the universities. Are there anything else you would add, Cindy?
It is as long as the organization is affiliated to a degree granting institution. There are some research institutions that might not be a university, but they are degree granting. And if the applicant has a faculty appointment and the institution is degree granting, they're eligible to apply. Let me see. I'm looking at. There are some questions about the submission to R1. So please, so note that the eligibility criteria, it regards not having applied to an R1 grant, whether it's funded or not, if it has a start date as early as July 1st of 2022. So it only applies up to that date. I see a question about an UH3. So if you submitted that question, please, we do need to look more deeply to give you a good answer. So we'd be happy to follow up over email. In terms of a collaborator, I see, Kevin, you're answering that one perhaps, but that this is an award to help the individual advance the research in their career. So collaborators are allowed if they would, if it's clear that it has to be clear what the principal investigator is advancing as the leader of a project. But we do understand that there may be need for collaborators for techniques or samples or so on. Can the division chief substitute for the chair? And do you want to comment on that, Kevin? And you're muted.
Sorry, what was the question? Oh, the division chief. Mm-hmm. So we recognize that different specialties have different sizes of departments, and so in this case, I think what we want ultimately is for the division chief or the department chair to have familiarity with the candidate or the applicant. And so in this case,
yeah, so I think the short answer is there's I agree with you, Kevin, and if you're in a department of medicine or pediatrics, then the division chief may submit the form instead of the chair. However, for all other departments, we do ask for that letter, or not the letter, sorry, I shouldn't say letter, the form to come from the department chair. And, I see a question here of whether a blank mentor and chair forms are available to applicants, and we do not have that, since it is some questions that are directly asked from those two individuals. However, it is described in one of the attachments to the request for applications, what is the information that will be requested. So it's there in one of the attachments, not the full form, but it gets it to what are we asking from each of them. And we suggest that you share those with the mentor and the department chair, so that when they get that request from you over email, they can have a set of answers ready to submit. Let's see. I'm scrolling through here.
While Cindy's doing that, there have been a couple of questions through email about the Stephen I. Katz Early Stage Investigator Research Project Grant, which is technically an R1 level grant, but it doesn't require preliminary data, or it prohibits preliminary data. We suggest that you submit, if you have applied for this particular grant, that you submit an eligibility exemption request, and we'll review it.
Yeah. We see this question about the degree completion as a requirement for the CSDA. For example, master's degree, a PhD, and we do recognize that some key awardees may be completing a degree. And I think so the rationale for us to require this is that the award seeks to support a stage where the time for research can be maximized, but it's something that we consider, and we're opening at this. We cannot change the criteria for this particular year's competition, but we will evaluate it if it is something that needs to be considered for future competitions. I see a practical question of whether the NIH biographical sketch has changed, and so what format do we want for the mentor's biographical sketch? And the most recent NIH biographical sketch is okay. That's there is no template. The template that we provide for the competition is just for the applicant to use. I see a question about an investigational device exemption, and I don't have an answer right now, but we can follow up on that after this webinar.
I see a question about clinical research in psychiatry and mental health, and whether it's within the funding priorities for the award. This is something that I wanted to mention, is that the award does not have any specific disease area priority, and we welcome clinical research from all.
Absolutely. And, as we mentioned earlier, what is evaluated is in those review criteria, and you will see that there is no there's no priority by disease area or research type. Our part of our responsibility and work is to make sure that we have reviewers and a panel that is able to evaluate the importance of the research that you're proposing to do, and to recognize that which are those that merit support. So please submit your research without that concern. Let's see. Based on same thing here, based on past awarded projects, there's I guess a sense that basic science projects are funded. We do fund in a range of, and along the spectrum, as I mentioned earlier, all the way through clinical studies with human subjects. And I invite you to our website. There's maybe Karen can share on the chat what is, I don't know if, or we can share later, but you can check on our website the range of projects that we have supported over the years, and we'll see that there is a range there. Race, ethnicity, gender data available for application success rates. Thanks for sharing that. We do have, there is a publication actually from a few years ago now, 2017-18, about gender and how success rate by gender, and how there were disparities. We have made great efforts to fix that, and to try to eliminate eliciting biases in reviewers, and making sure that we define exactly what we're looking for to minimize introducing bias. And have to say that success rate by gender is the same. And in fact, in the past, since 2017, we received 50% applications from women, and the success rate is the same as for men. In terms of race, ethnicity, that data aren't published yet. We're trying to publish it, but in the past couple of years, we've made increased efforts to make sure that the success rate, there are no disparities in funding by race, and we've seen improvement in the past couple of years in our processes and who we support. So thanks for asking that question.
For there is a question about the pre-proposal application and mentors. So we do ask for one mentor, whether it's a primary mentor or the primary mentor of a mentorship team, to submit to the mentor form. We do ask that if you have a mentorship team, that you submit a biosketch for every mentor, but only one of them needs to be designated as a primary mentor in order to submit to the mentorship form. So the biosketch is needed for all mentors if you have more than one. But if you do have more than one mentor, like a mentorship team, you have to designate one of them to submit to the mentor form online.
Thank you. Also, in terms of being a recipient of a subcontract or sub-award for an R01 submission. So if you are not the PI or co-PI, that does not affect your eligibility. And, I see a question, if you become an assistant professor in the next 4 months, if you're not quite yet, would you be eligible? And the answer is no, you would not be eligible yet. We ask for applicants to be having at least about a year in their faculty appointment, as if you look at that window of eligibility. And part of the reason is because there are, the competition, something perhaps we didn't mention. We received anywhere between 200 to 300 applications per year. And so if you haven't had that, there's a range in where applicants are in the research experience and their research as they put in a proposal. So we find that if those that are earlier, on the earlier side, would benefit from having another year under the belt before they apply to this competition. Are preliminary data required? And actually, this ties in something perhaps that we didn't touch on, which is also COVID and how the pandemic has affected the ability of researchers to gather preliminary data. in general, we want enough preliminary data that helps inform that there is a research question there that merits further investigation. So some preliminary data are required, but we're also being mindful and sharing with the review panel and that there are generalized impacts of the pandemic on scientists' ability to gather data. So it's certainly something that is being considered. Our implementation and dissemination studies that have clinical outcome component within the funding priority. And again, we can't stress enough that we do not have funding priorities based on research type or disease area or so on. But we want to support good and important research. So if you have a good, an important clinical outcomes question, certainly is within the scope of the competition. This is a new question that is part of the pandemic. Global health projects are eligible. That is true. Is Zoom projects for underserved countries acceptable, or must be in-person projects? I have to say that's there's a first one that I've seen these. I think it's I can't say like that they're not eligible or acceptable. I think is part of the proposal to make a case for why the research question that you're proposing and the approach that you're using important to address. If that's helpful. Kevin, are there others you're looking at that you'd like to address?
So there is one that maybe I conveyed a misconception that the research plan was not the highest priority consideration. So the research plan is a very important consideration in the review. What we just want to say is that the review criteria in attachment 1 is provided for you for transparency, and all of those criteria are important criteria. And what I wanted to say is that those same criteria are provided to the review panel. So just please review them carefully, but they are all important considerations in the review.
Yes, absolutely. So the research plan is very important, and the first stage of review, I think what also we're recognizing is a 2-page pre-proposal, right? So there's only so much you can convey about methodology. We understand it's not a deep explanation, but a deep research plan description, which will come in the second stage. But this stage of the review will definitely very closely look at what is the importance of the research question, and does it seem like you're thinking about it in a sound way of how to approach the research question? So it's certainly very important. Let's see.
So there's a question here about the degrees. So whether can we more clearly define clinical and research training? So what about certificate programs or CME programs or short courses from meetings?
So it is towards a degree, right? So
yeah,
you can be doing certificates or courses, taking, but yeah, if you're enrolled in a degree program, you're not eligible unless you've finished it by the start date. So several questions here for prospective applicants. Is there a limit to the number of times an applicant can submit? So that short answer there is no, as long as, the question just disappeared. As long as you are still eligible. I think maybe Karen addressed it. Is that right, Karen?
I did just mark it as answered. So.
Oh, sorry, it disappeared, so I cannot see the other 2 questions. So as long as they're eligible, I can't find the question anymore.
The next question was, do applicants receive any written feedback from the review, and should applicants address reviewer comments in a resubmission?
Thank you. So for this stage, we do, as I said, we do receive many applications. So we ask for reviewers to give us comments on a voluntary basis, and have tried, last year, I think is the first time that for this stage we provided comments as available. We'll try to do that, but we cannot guarantee for this stage of the competition. For the full proposals, there is certainly a set of comments that we would provide for feedback. If somebody applied in previous years and wants to resubmit, we treat those as new submissions. So we do not recommend, mentioning or addressing that you applied before or that you're addressing a past concern, because very likely the reviewers will be different. And also just for context, the number of reviewers that participates in this stage is somewhere in the order of like 20 something, right? And it could be, they vary by year. So this is the first time very likely that a reviewer could be looking at a proposal, even if it's a resubmission. Kevin, I see you typing, but if you want to take another one.
It was just a question about, or a comment on the training period or the training requirement, about how NIH K-Series awards have an education or career development component. So you can hold both a K and a CSE at the same time. By training, we do mean like clinical training and research training towards degrees. So these are the PhDs and master's degrees, fellowships for subspecialty fellows. Yeah. So we don't mean to include training for continuing medical education or classes that you might be taking to supplement your research training.
Yes, and for those, I don't, some in the call may not be following what the question was, but the question there is, if somebody is in training, are they ineligible to, or in training for a degree, are they ineligible to apply, even if they're faculty and meet all of their eligibility criteria? So if you meet all the eligibility criteria and you're in a degree training program towards an MPH, towards a PhD, and it would be completed by the award start date, then you are eligible. If not, you wouldn't be eligible. But even concurrent with the award, you may enroll in other, just enrichment programs or, types of training activities, and that is okay. And in fact, we recognize that sometimes to carry out the project, you may need to, and you will need to learn, continue learning other techniques or other skills.
There are a couple of questions about preliminary data. Did we already address that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Subcontracts. We recognize we do not provide a lot of information about budgets at this stage, only because it is not part of the pre-proposal. But if you have questions, it would be helpful to know as you think of whether to apply. We're always happy to provide more information. Yeah, and there's this question again about being a subcontractor on an R1 grant. So if you're a co-investigator on any grant that is R1 level, that does not affect your eligibility. But if you're a PI of the direct award, that R1 or that other larger grant or co-PI, then you would not be eligible.
Here's are physician scientists who are employed by another health science school, not a medical school, eligible?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Another question on the 1-year eligibility. So what I mean there is that
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Is the 1-year cutoff eligibility based in July 2022 or on the time of application, November 2021? So the 1-year eligibility, the appointment, applicants should have been appointed to an assistant professor position for at least 1 year, so we're putting that threshold at December 1, 2020.
Thank you. Yeah, it's based on the eligibility window. That's roughly a year, but not necessarily.
if there are more than one mentor, should the mentor letter come from the primary mentor or the mentorship team? So re-emphasizing that it's not a letter, it's a form that you have to enter in, and you have to enter in their emails, and then they answer questions. And so it's not a letter, and we want, if you have a mentorship team, multiple mentors, you have to, for the form, for the purposes of this form, of the mentor form, you have to designate one of them as the primary, and they could speak on the role of the mentorship team in your career development and research project. So yes, you have to designate one of them.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. And also, there's something that's important is that designated mentor will be evaluated in some capacity for their mentorship. The mentorship is an important aspect of these awards. So even if you have a mentorship team, please, there is a description of what is evaluated in that designated mentor. So, for example, the fact that they have a track record of research funding, so as a way to evaluate whether they're able to provide that direction as applicants build to their future funding is very important.
Someone wants to confirm the eligibility window is related to the first assistant professor appointment and not to instructor or clinical lecturer appointments. So yes, that's confirming that the eligibility window refers to appointments for your first faculty assistant professor position.
Exactly.
For institutional eligibility, are PIs at teaching hospitals eligible?
Yeah, so if we consider degree granting institution and its affiliated hospitals are part of the same umbrella. So if you, for example, are at, let me think, if you're, say, at Harvard, and they're saying at Harvard, there's, those are, and you have an assistant professor appointment at Harvard Medical School, that's okay, they're eligible. And if you have more specific question, please, and this doesn't answer, please get in touch and we will clarify. And it's just something else actually that goes to what Karen shared about how to apply. I just wanted to call your attention that the link is out and available. So if you do want to check that part of the application, it is now live. And we welcome feedback. As Karen mentioned, this is a new system that we're transitioning to. So we've tested it, or Karen and Kevin and others, the foundation have tested it a lot. So if you find something, please to get in touch. And very important to know that the deadline, the forms will automatically shut down. So please submit ahead of the deadline, not at the last minute. And I see we're reached the end. If there are any questions we didn't get to, we will try to summarize and get back to you. If there are anything specific, please do get in touch too. We will be happy to address questions and help clarify anything that was not clear or for which you may need more information.
Yes, so thank you for joining, and yeah, we'll get back to you if your question was not answered, or we encourage you to reach out to ddcf@aibs.org with the subject line 2022 CSDA and include your last name. And we would please no phone calls, as we cannot guarantee a timely response to those. Your best bet will be to reach out to the email that I mentioned. And with that, thank you for joining us. Thanks for your time and attention, and we hope to see lots of applications from you all. Thank you. Have a good day.